In the column of history marked Most Evil Australians, the name Ivan Robert Marco Milat features prominently. So the death of the 74-year-old murdering monster will be mourned by few. Instead, it will more likely be welcome news, especially for the families and friends of the 7 young adventurers whose lives he so cruelly stole in the Belanglo State Forest south of Sydney. When you look at Ivan Milat in the last days of his life, he looked like just a frail, old, pathetic man. Who do you see?
I see a frail, old, pathetic man that, to me, he died a long time ago. And he's nothing but an evil killer.
Ivan Milat's brother, Boris, is calling it as he sees it. Blood ties mean nothing. Death cannot soften his judgment of a man who callously killed so many.
Don't forget, this man has proven to kill 7 backpackers in a murderous way, tore at them like animals, tortured their bodies even after they were dead. This man is just an evil serial killer, right to the last bone of him. He was dead to me a long time ago.
Tonight, Boris wants to remember the young victims of Ivan Milat and to speak of his relief that his brother is dead. He is the only member of the Milat clan to publicly denounce the notorious serial killer in life and now in death. Boris, as you sit here today, are you proud or embarrassed to be a Milat?
Embarrassed. I am definitely embarrassed to be a Milat.
So no grief at all?
No grief for Ivan whatsoever. None at all. He deserves where he is and deserves what he's got.
So how much grief would there be within the Milat family with the death of Ivan?
It would be a big loss. This would be poor Ivan, poor Ivan, poor Ivan. You know, poor bugger's locked up there. You know, even though he's guilty, but poor Ivan. That's it. I'm a voice in the wilderness yelling out to them, and they think I'm just being vicious towards Ivan. And the thing is here, and I just want the truth out there.
So what are they denying?
They're denying that he did anything. They're denying that he killed anybody. They are saying that the police made it all up. It all comes back to, he didn't do it, he didn't do it. They must have an IQ that's small. You know, a 12-year-old child would figure out, with the evidence they put there, oh yeah, but it's all tainted. It was put up by the police. They planted this and they planted that, and they put the bottle in here and they put the tent in here, and the evidence there, even a 12-year-old child would stamp his papers guilty.
Why is it that they're not horrified like you are at what Ivan Malak did?
I think it's just an acceptance that they just love the guy. They just love the guy.
How does it feel for you, Boris, that your family would prefer to support a psychopath serial killer to you?
It hurts bad. It hurts bad. Well, Christ, I'll shut me trap up and snip me lips tomorrow. And if you get out here and call it out for what it is. There's people out there just like you with daughters that have been torn to pieces by this psychopath. And they're not, and it doesn't mean nothing. Oh, his life's important, theirs is not. Get to hell. You've got to be crazy to believe that sort of crap.
Why do you think he killed those people?
It would have been a bit of money involved. It would have been the joy of killing too. That would have been involved. The thrill, the anxiety. But most of all, he could get away with it. No, he just didn't have empathy for people. He had all the all the bull dust, and that's it.
His love came from killing people.
I would say his love come from killing people. And I don't know if it was quite as blunt as that, but he got a charge out of it, obviously. We think. Might have been other motives. It might have been that he just seen beautiful things and he'd like to destroy them, be it male or female. Doesn't matter.
When you learned about how those backpackers were killed and toyed with, played with, brutally murdered.
Oh, don't even talk to me about it. Don't want to go there, I'll get emotional. I just...
Why will you get emotional about that? It's okay. Okay, we'll just take a moment. It's okay. No, it's all right.
Yeah.
Just take a moment.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. What's going on?
Nothing. What can I say? You just pulling on my heartstrings there a bit.
Well, I'm a bit surprised by your reaction.
I don't want to go in that part of it, okay? Yeah, because that upsets me. People have got a right to die properly, an accident or whatever. You don't need some mongrel to come and do those things.
No, it is. It's just too awful to think about, isn't it?
You have to change the line of question. It's okay. Move on. Let's get it going. Please.
Okay. Well, you know, I guess what I'm trying to understand from your perspective is what was going on in Ivan's brain. You know, what turned him into that monster?
Just the way he was. 1 in 10. Insane. What the old man used to say.
Born that way?
You're going to find if you went right, if you could have got into his head, that there was something wrong with him. It has to be, you know. But for anyone to do all those sort of things, no, I don't like thinking about how they died. That's still with me, even though you're going on to other questions. Because it's really terrible. And if you think I get upset, what about their mother and father and brothers and sisters? You know? Anyhow, yeah. Keep asking. If you want to.
The judge at Ivan Milat's trial said it was inevitable that someone else was involved in those crimes. Who could that be?
It's none of the boys. I got to tell you that, Dan.
But did you at any time suspect or worry that some of your other brothers might have been involved?
Never.
What was the reaction at the time when suspicion was raised about both Richard and Wally being accessories to Ivan?
Richard has not got killer in him. He himself was never, in my books, ever remotely connected with that.
Or Wally?
Wally wouldn't be capable of it.
Do you believe that Ivan Malak was powerful enough to take down 2 people at a time?
Yes, easy done. You could do it with one hand behind his back. Of course, what are you going to do when I got a 45 stuck in your face? What are you going to do? Tie him up or I'll shoot you too. Okay? That's it. It's all over. That's it. Or, bang, you're dead straight away, and the other one there is my pickings.
How do you think your family is going to react to you speaking out on the death of your brother?
I'm putting it out there on the family now, and I can't push it enough. You know, these mongrels hate my guts because I'm one guy that speaks out. But somebody's got to tell these mums and dads why their kids died. You know, why this mongrel thinks he can wipe them out like a dirty rag and get around and smile and, how you going, Ivan, all this, and we love you still, even though you destroy lives. You know, I know I'm being dramatic, Tom, but that's how it goes.
Do you think that the rest of the Milat family had that power, had that influence if they wanted to get Ivan Milat to confess to the backpacker murders and to anything else?
They wouldn't. They have the power.
It's too late now.
Too late now. He's gone now. It isn't even about the backpackers. It's about their mums and dads. They're gone. Those poor people are gone. It's their live ones. You know, I would have walked heaven and earth not to see them people there, you know, killed. Just stop, think about it. It's the horrible, horrible person that done it. And seeing his dad now, he's where he is. And the whole saga is best forgotten, but remember the victims. Remember these innocent people as well.
Coming up, remembering the victims.
Their spinal cord was cut, paralysing them, while perhaps the murderer went away and then came back later.
And infatuated with a murderer.
That was probably a fantasy because he was muscly and attractive that way.
Ivan's sister-in-law makes her own detailed confession. Were you intimate with Ivan? That's next on 60 Minutes.
Police describe the murders as premeditated, committed with unspeakable horror, cruelty and savagery.
1993, and the Belanglo State Forest, south of Sydney, gives up its tragic secrets.
We now have 7 bodies recovered.
7 young backpackers savagely slain.
And we don't know the cause of death in the present case.
By a monster on the loose.
But we do have a serial killer.
The bodies of 2 British backpackers were the first to be found. Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters, both 22, and both subjected to the most awful deaths.
It would have been quite horrendous what they went through.
Police spent much of today searching for a murder weapon.
As Roger Maynard reported at the time, the terror and pain the young friends were forced to suffer was unimaginable.
One of the most terrible things about the way they died was that their spinal cord was cut, thereby not killing them, but paralysing them. And the theory is that they were allowed to remain in that situation for some time, while perhaps the murderer went away and then came back later to finish them off. Now, who would do that sort of thing? You know, they weren't killed instantly. They had to suffer, you know, for hours or maybe a day or more before they finally died.
The chilling details appalled us all, but would forever haunt Joanne's mourning parents, Jill and Ray Walters.
These people who have done these to these girls, that they are just proper animals and they ought to be shot.
But it was just one man, Ivan Milat.
5 of the victims were stabbed to death, one of them decapitated. The other 2 were shot in the head.
His actions so twisted and so evil that to the world, he'll always be known simply and notoriously as the backpacker murderer.
When they did arrest him, I was at work and I'd seen it on the TV and I couldn't believe it.
Maureen is Ivan's former sister-in-law. What aspect of it couldn't you believe?
It was when they were arresting Ivan. Yeah, it was like that's the man I knew that was a nice person, didn't have guns and wasn't really violent.
Maureen was once married to Ivan's brother, Wally.
Has the place changed much since you were here as a young woman?
Yeah. Yes, a great deal, yeah. Yeah, it's a lot busier. And curb and guttering wasn't there.
Maureen was just 14 or 15 when she started hanging out with the Malats here at the old family home. Taking us back to the 70s, you can still see Wally's name etched into their concrete driveway. What was it about the Malat boys that you liked so much?
I guess you're just coming into puberty and it's boys and they were next door and they weren't at school. They weren't your school friends. And they were always a bit rugged. They played with cars and like probably what attracted me to Wally, what he never wore any shoes, just jeans and no shirt. He was quite muscly and he was all right to talk to.
But the teenager had to wait a little while to meet Ivan, who was then serving time for armed robbery. On his release, whether it was true or not, he told Maureen a tale that was disturbingly prophetic.
One particular time he picked me up and he drove me home. On the way home, I said, "Oh, you're in jail. What did you go to jail for? Did you murder somebody?" Because I thought that's what people went to jail for. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I killed a man with a knife and I buried him in the bush." Okay, and he was laughing. And I don't know whether it was a true thing or a story. I just guess I'll never know.
What does your gut tell you? What does your instinct tell you?
Deep down, I think it was true. I just don't want to think that he could be capable of doing something like that.
Well, he's capable of doing that and plus plenty more.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, I just thought, no, he couldn't do that. He's too nice.
Back then, Maureen found her brother-in-law charming and attentive.
Sometimes Wally would go off shooting and he might come and visit me.
So while Wally was shooting, Ivan was visiting you?
Yes.
Were you intimate with Ivan?
That's a part of my life I'm not really proud of, but I had been at certain points, not all the time. So, and just things happen, on and off, maybe a year or so, not a long time.
Did you think at any stage that you might have been in love with Ivan or that there was a future with Ivan?
No, way back it was probably a fantasy because he was muscly and attractive that way. But no.
A fantasy of what?
You know, oh yeah, look all right. But yeah, when you think, oh, I don't want you for a husband.
How do you feel now knowing that you did have a relationship with a serial killer, a psychopath?
Yeah, it's a bit creepy. I just don't like to think about that.
Ivan was clearly used to taking what he wanted. As well as Maureen, he had an affair with another sister-in-law, Marilyn, who had his child, a daughter named Lenice. Ivan's brother, Boris, who was married to Marilyn at the time, raised the child as his own, despite the deception. How long was Ivan Milat having an affair with your wife?
Apparently it never stopped. And I really wanted to walk away from the whole lot. But there was a little girl involved and...
Did you think Lenice was your daughter?
I always knew that she wasn't my daughter because I suspected what was going on.
Did you and Ivan have a blow-up? Did you say
Always.
to him, "You are having an affair with my wife, this has got to
Yeah,
stop,"
yeah.
or what happened?
I just said to him, well, leave me alone.
Leave
I
her
put
alone?
a knife on him. And when I caught him up in the house the second time, something said to me, something's not right. I ripped the cupboard door open. There he is inside.
That must
At
have
the
been
cupboard
awful.
door, shivering and shaking like this. I said, I ought to kill you. I ought to kill you now. And he's shivering and shaking.
Can I just ask, considering what Ivan Milat went on to do, does any part of you wish that you had shot him, that you had killed him?
People have said that to me. Even the police have said that to me. You should have shot him. You know,
No, I'm not saying you should have. I'm just
12.
saying, do you wish you had have?
If I know he was going to harm these people, yes. But it's not in me to take a life unless I'm defending me own.
Coming up,
He's not innocent.
catching the backpacker killer,
He was always in competition with the police and the authorities.
the one that got away,
He runs down the highway, zigzagging across the road.
and a family's outrageous denials.
He has actually said to me, I have not done this, and I believe him. With all my soul, I believe him.
That's next on 60 Minutes. In your opinion, John, is the world a better place now that Ivan Milat is dead?
Absolutely, without question. We don't need him.
With Ivan Milat's death, the only regret for retired New South Wales Police Assistant Commissioner John Leacock is the lost chance to expose Milat's darkest secrets.
He was a blight on our society. There's a lot of questions to be answered and probably never will be.
Do you believe that there are more bodies?
I suspect so, yes.
Do you have any idea of how many?
No idea whatsoever.
In the 70s, John Leacock was a police officer in Western Sydney who knew the Milat family.
You could call them wild and you could call them feral. There was constant police activity at their place in early hours of the morning, and police were coming and going to the extent that I think they were chalking up frequent flyer points at one stage.
John would be critical to cracking the case against Milat. He was struck by how similar the backpacker murders were to a rape case back in the 70s. Back then, Ivan Milat had picked up two hitchhikers, tied them up at knife point, and raped one of the women. He would get off the rape charge on a technicality, but lucky for the backpacker murder task force, John had a long memory. What was it that led to you thinking that Ivan Milat might be good for the backpacker murders?
Ivan Milat had been looked at as a person of interest in addition to many others. I suggested then that many years ago that Ivan had a similar MO, picking up hitchhikers at the crossroads at Liverpool. I suggested the task force have a look, and it was a major change of focus for the task force that was able to pull him out and put him on the front page.
How big a breakthrough was it in terms of making Ivan Milat the prime suspect?
That little snippet, it was there all the time, but nobody had found it. So, as I keep saying, it's all in the documents.
By now, Maureen and Ivan's brother Wooley were divorced, but that didn't stop detectives knocking on her door as part of the investigation into Ivan.
I thought maybe it was a robbery or something like that. I did not think it would be so horrendous. And they were talking to me for about 5 hours. And I said, look, I've got a photo here. If I find it, I'll give it to you. So that was the photo that they wanted.
The photo was taken in January 1991. Just 11 days later, Ivan would use this car to abduct German backpacker Simone Schmiedel before murdering her. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's not good. Not good. That upsets me, what he did to those people, to those kids. It upsets me for the parents. And, yeah, it's just, it's all horrific. Sorry. Yeah, and I like to know him, and he was a nice person. And then he thought he had the right to do that to somebody. And yeah, what they would have gone through would have been horrific.
And you never saw a glimpse of that monster?
No, no.
On the day this photo was taken, Ivan offered Maureen one chilling piece of advice.
It's only what he said when he came to visit. You know, did kids hitchhike? They shouldn't hitchhike. There might be rat bags on the road like me. You know, I thought a bit. I suppose I didn't even take that serious, you know. I mean, You go, well, I hope if you see a hitchhiker, you're going to pick them up. They're going from A to B, and...
Yes, sadly, he did pick them up.
He did.
Police were closing in, but the investigation would ultimately hinge on one eyewitness, the one who got away to tell of the terror they must have all felt.
You were wandering along here?
Yes.
Looking for something to drink?
Yeah.
So it all comes back?
Oh, yeah.
As Paul Onions told 60 Minutes in his one and only ever interview, it was January 1990 when he accepted the generous offer of a ride.
This is where the journey starts.
And you meet your first Australian?
Yeah.
That man was Ivan Milat.
As Malak drove toward his killing ground, Paul began to sense him getting edgy.
Roger Maynard, who closely followed the case, says Onion's gut instinct saved his life that day.
He was driving down the highway with Milat. Milat stops on the side of the road, ostensibly to get a cassette out to put in his radio.
That was his excuse, really, to get some cassettes from under the seat to put some music on. Well, it just seemed odd because there was actually cassettes in between us.
Produces a revolver, and then Onions sees a coil of rope, and that really, really scares him.
But as soon as I seen the rope, I thought, oh, that's going to be it's going to take a bit of time. He's going to do whatever he wants.
So Onions jumps out of the car and realises that if he's going to save his life, he's got to escape. And he runs down the highway, zigzagging across the road, while Malak is pursuing him with his gun, shooting at Onions.
I thought the next vehicle that comes over the bow of the hill, I'm just going to stop it no matter what.
What, jump in front of it?
Yeah.
In desperation, Paul throws himself in front of a people mover driven by Joanne Berry.
He just about screamed, "Help me, he's got a gun." And that was very clear.
When you did look back, as the car retreated, did you see the look in his face?
Well, like a smirk, like. It's a bit strange the way he was looking. And that's the last impression I had, like.
And after that, of course, Mrs. Berry and Onions go to the local police station at Bowral and report the incident. But remarkably, nothing happens. And so a great missed opportunity there, one of many missed opportunities, I suspect.
If that opportunity hadn't been missed, what could that mean for the other lives lost?
Certainly some lives would have been saved if Malak had been apprehended at that time.
2 years later, and back in the UK, Paul Onions catches the news headlines, sees reports of the terrible fate of the missing backpackers, and points Australian authorities to his original police report. Investigators fly him to Sydney to identify his attacker.
I went through all the pictures, and that was the one that gave me initial reaction. It just made me uneasy when I looked at it. And then when I looked closer, I said to him, that's the person who I think I met that day.
It was Ivan Milat. Police swooped on his Eaglevale home where they found a treasure trove of evidence. Gun parts from the murder weapon, electrical tape, backpacks and sleeping bags of the victims.
He was always in competition with the police and the authorities, and I would say he thought he would never get caught.
How critical was the evidence found at the Milat house?
It was a link between the deceased's people and Ivan Milat and the crimes. It's pretty important stuff, particularly if you've got names on property which had occurred that belonged to some of the backpackers.
In further raids, police found more evidence in the homes of Milat's mother and his two brothers, Wally and Richard, who both deny any involvement. But at trial, Milat's own lawyer argued police had arrested the wrong family member. During this interview with Richard Colton in 1996, Richard Milat reiterated his innocence.
So, Mr. Richard Milat, give me your explanation, please, of how come Carolyn Clark, this is the woman that got 10 bullets to the head, her sleeping bag cover, her sleeping mat and her tent were found in your garden shed.
That's only hearsay.
No, it's not hearsay at all, it's the evidence.
Evidence of who?
And the sleeping bag of Joanne Walters, a 22-year-old lass, was found in a cupboard in that same shed. Can you explain, please?
I can't explain it. What do you mean explain? How it got into the cupboard? How it was there?
Yeah.
I can't be sure.
Well, if you can't be sure, then is it reasonable for the likes of me and others to speculate that maybe you had something to do with it getting there?
Well, I don't know. You want to trust the police?
Well, for a moment I'll trust you if you tell me.
Yeah, well, I can't say.
Or would you accept that it looks a bit sus then?
No, I don't accept that it looks a bit sus.
Despite the judge at his trial believing the killer hadn't acted alone, Ivan Malak was the only one found guilty of the murders. The evidence was overwhelming, but his family, including sister-in-law Caroline, here with husband William Mallet, continued to maintain his innocence.
Well, what would you need to convince you that your brother did it?
He would have to tell us. He would have to use those words, "I did it." And then I would believe him. But he has actually said to me, "I have not done this," and I believe him. With all my soul, I believe him.
I believe he did it. He's not innocent.
Why do you think so many of the Malats believe that Ivan Mallet is innocent?
Can't understand that, but they all stick together. They're a strong group. They're a strong family. And they'll stick together no matter what.
Coming up, the man Mallet confided in.
But he would always have an answer.
The revealing letters.
He really genuinely thought he didn't do it, ultimately. You know,
Really? And the murderer's final days.
He wouldn't plead guilty to breathing. He certainly wouldn't confess to a murder.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
And the prison number.
Goulburn. It's a good address to have.
Yeah.
You're a prisoner.
I must admit, when they started arriving at my post office, the post office staff gave me some raised eyebrows when they saw the name on the back.
In 1996, Ivan Mallet was given 7 life sentences for the murder of 7 backpackers. From the confines of his prison cell, Mallet chose author Roger Maynard to be his pen pal, always protesting his innocence in his prodigious letters. Does he talk about death at all in his letters?
He does. He talks on a couple of occasions about death. That cancer, he says, is a real bastard. God's way to keep the faithful a bit more faithful. And Malak says, those end-of-life thoughts, of course, nothing matters once you're dead. Mostly you are soon forgotten, though my relatives will remember a long while after I die. And then he finishes, if I died tomorrow, I lose the possibility to establish my innocence. So he's clearly taking his guilt to the grave.
Before he was in the throes of esophageal cancer, Malak wrote to Roger for 8 years, hoping to convince him he'd been set up.
Malak would always say, oh, it was planted, I was framed, but he would always have an answer. He would always have a reason or an answer to support what he was saying, you know. And
did you ever believe him?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, not once. You have to accept that he was deluded. I think he was so used to denying his involvement that he really genuinely thought he didn't do it. Ultimately, you know.
Really?
Oh yeah. I'm sure he got himself into that sort of frame of mind.
If Ivan Malat's letters do not hold confessions or information about other murders, potential murders he committed, what is the value of them?
I think it probably offers an insight into his mind more than anything, the fact that he can continue to deny it. I was always hopeful that he might drop his guard, that he might say something that could incriminate him, but he never did.
How would you describe the mind of Ivan Mallet?
I think the mind of a monster. He was definitely a man with a very evil side to him, a man who got his kicks out of these deviant acts, if you like, and they weren't just straightforward murders. There was a great element of deviancy to them.
From his letters, did you get a sense of whether he was crazy?
No, I didn't. I didn't, not at all. I thought he was a very sane individual, apart from, his depraved activities, if you like, I think he was very clear-minded. I think he knew what he was doing. He had a very clear understanding of the case against him, and how he might try to fight it, how he might try to demonstrate his innocence.
There was a desperate hope that in the face of his own death, the serial killer would finally confess to all the lives he'd taken. But even on his deathbed, mercy was beyond Ivan Milat, just as his former cop foe John Leacock predicted.
He wouldn't plead guilty to breathing, and he certainly wouldn't confess to a murder or to a homicide.
And you knew that all along?
Yeah. Look, I think if you drove your car out to the jail to interview Ivan about other crimes, you may as well keep the motor running.
"74-year-old Ivan Milat has finally succumbed to cancer. By all accounts, his death would have been painful. Perhaps some comfort for the families he tore apart when he started his mindless murder spree 30 years ago. It certainly doesn't seem to trouble John, Ivan's former lover Maureen, or his brother Boris. And his manner of death, esophageal cancer, what do you think about that?
Oh, well, they're the cards that were played to him, so I can't say too much about that.
You certainly can't say anything sympathetic.
I'm not sympathetic, no.
What is your emotion around the death of Ivan Milat?
None, I suppose. I don't think anything about it at all. To me, he died 20-odd years ago when he was arrested for this. Wasn't the person I knew. I'd rather remember the person I knew. A nice person. Yeah, so I have no feelings whatsoever. It's just a person that's died.
Have you given any thought, do you have any belief on what happens to Ivan Milat now that he's dead?
None at all, except a big relief that the world is rid of one of the, or Australia is rid of one of the notorious serial killers and psychopaths, and that's where he is. It's a damn shame that he couldn't have been coerced in with the rest of the his loving family to admit to it.
Coming up, never forgetting the years of terror.
It all comes back.
Oh, yeah.
And the question that couldn't be answered.
Do you accept it looks a bit sus then?
No, I don't accept that it looks a bit sus.
What, that there's the property of murdered women in your garden shed and you reckon it's not sus?
That's next on 60 Minutes. The trial of Ivan Milat in the New South Wales Supreme Court lasted 18 weeks. In July 1996, he was found guilty of the murders of the 7 young backpackers, as well as the attempted murder of the man who got away, British backpacker Paul Onions. The day after the conviction, 60 Minutes broadcast a remarkable interview with Paul Onions. He'd bravely taken Charles Wooley back to the scene of his escape from Milat.
So it all comes back.
Oh, yeah.
I'll have one of those cassettes, sir.
So, he just bent over, looked under the seat, and just pulled out a revolver. And obviously, all the questions was answered in one movement.
In the same program that Paul Onions described Milat's depravity, our former colleague, the late Richard Carlton, spoke with members of Milat's family, including 2 of his brothers, Richard and Bill Milat. They tried to convince the country an innocent man had been convicted.
I don't think any of the brothers are violent.
But it was a claim Carlton was having none of. And he went on to show why he was one of the best interviewers Australia has ever produced.
Or would you accept that it looks a bit sus then?
No, I don't accept that it looks a bit sus.
What, that there's the property of murdered women in your garden shed and you reckon it's not sus?
How many people have identified this stuff?
Well, you want to know how many were murdered?
I know how many people were murdered.
By your family?
By my family, yeah, I'd like to know how many.
Both Richard Carlton's incredible interview with the Mallet family and Charles Wooley's exclusive story with Paul Onions can be seen in their entirety on 9 Now. And they're certainly worth watching. Ivan Milat terrorising a nation is an awful chapter in our history, but also a reminder of the bravery and determination of those people, including police, who brought this mass murderer to justice. Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9 Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.